Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome back to our watch club for Marvel's Moon Knight. No unbalanced souls on my boat. Them's the rules. Welcome to Watch Club. My name is Nate, and this is our Watch Club for Marvel's Moon Knight, Episode 5, the penultimate episode, titled Asylum. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Watch Club, our weekly review series, kind of like a book club, but way better. Keep in mind, we will be going into full spoilers for this series and the MCU in general, so if you haven't watched this week's episode yet, be sure to do so, and then come right back in a snap. Now, before we explore the recesses of our collective minds, let me introduce you to the other personalities joining me today. First up, he's a Marvel nut who's taller than King Tut. He's the Egyptian jackal, Justin Lawrence.
What's up? How are ya?
Good. How you doing, man? Do you like sand?
Good.
Do you like sand?
No, it's cold, of course, and just gets everywhere. I don't know. I can't remember that long.
No, that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it.
It's rough and coarse. It's rough and...
There we go. Rough and coarse. Rough and coarse.
Rough and coarse. Rough intercourse. Right.
Well, speaking of rough and coarse, alongside him, let me clear my esophagus as he gets out of his sarcophagus. He's cooler than Khonshu, but if you make fun of his mummy, he's not afraid to haunt you. He's Kevin, the crocodile Hudson.
I got to say, man, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get one of your trademark, really authentic
there we go.
British accents doing a quote to start the show.
You know what? I figured, that especially in this episode, there were so many fake, authentic British accents. I figured I'd just sort of leave it alone. You know, whatever. And plus, I'm never going to be able to pull off a Tawaret. You know what I mean? She's just too perfect. But speaking of perfect, oh my gosh, let me tell you. Joining us again this week on the podcast, he floats like a butterfly but stings like a bee. His name's Mike with an E. He's Mike Smith from the Dumpster Talk podcast. How's it going again, Mike?
I am doing absolutely great. Listening to you say that, I'm like, how would you spell Mike without an E?
Right.
So I was, it got me really confused, and then I was like, oh, I have to answer a question. Shit.
I'm sure in some country there's a Mike without an E. But Mike, I wanted to ask you. I know I meant to ask you this last week, which is why I'm stoked to have you back again this week. I sent you a BuzzFeed quiz to determine which Egyptian god you'd be, and we did this on the podcast for our episode 3. I'm very interested to hear your results. What god would you be according to BuzzFeed?
So I did do it, and I have already previously listened to your watch club, so I believe I'm joining a pretty badass club as I am Osiris, god of resurrection and death.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So I'm I feel like I'm joining there. And it's great. Like I love these types of things because they either all make people feel amazing or they all make people feel like crap. And this one's an all make people feel really great about themselves. Like I am that badass. So
yeah. It's very cool. I mean, listen, near the end of this episode, I think Osiris gets a mention. Would you be? What would your ruling be if you saw this all happening? Would you let it all go down, or would you get pretty upset?
I feel like gods usually have like a pretty good intuition, so I would like to think that I'm like, okay, well, these are great people trying to do great things, but the feeling I'm getting is not so much. Like Osiris is going to be pissed. Like he doesn't sound like the cool guy in the description from that BuzzFeed quiz. That's for sure.
Totally. He should take a BuzzFeed quiz, or his avatar should. But
yeah.
Anyways, guys, I feel like
right on that.
That's how they picked them in the first place.
Is that how they did it? They interviewed.
Yeah. It was just a BuzzFeed questionnaire.
Well, listen, I feel like we've taken enough time to pass through the fields of reeds. So listen, let's get into this story. The episode starts off as we see water rushing into a cave while hearing a little boy cry for help, followed by the sight of a woman staring down on us, saying, "This is all your fault." Then we immediately cut to a screaming hippo, and then back to Harrow's office, where we see Mark, now with a bloodied nose, with Dr. Harrow, really trying to reassure him that he's bouncing between two realities, one that is filled with nonsense and one that isn't. Harrow tells Mark that the hippo could break down the walls between himself and Steven, and that just before he lost his temper, he was telling him about a little boy. As soon as Harrow asks for more information about the boy, Mark stands up while holding a sharp glass paperweight, claiming that, you know what, he feels a lot better. Harrow presses an emergency button under his desk, and then Kennedy and Fitzgerald subdue Mark by sticking him with a needle. So, guys, let's dig into the sequence here. What did you think of this conversation between Mark and Harrow? And did you also notice a bit of a voice change? Is that just me? With Mark?
Yeah, I noticed the voice change too, which is why I was thinking, this is the third personality that we're seeing.
Gotta be.
Kind of being woven through this dialogue. And there's been a couple instances that I know New Rockstar and I think a couple other people had pointed out in terms of when we hear Mark, there's a bit of a voice change, accent change that might imply that third personality. But this whole scene was really interesting. You called out the broken nose, the Band-Aid. That's very Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood's aesthetic for Mark Spector. He had the Band-Aid over his nose. But the conversation itself felt very odd. Like, when is this happening, right? In regards to what happens after this, right? Like, it's almost how we were kind of floating between different memories. Is this a memory? Is this a time when he was at this institution as the third personality? I don't know. I'm interested in hearing your guys' takes on it.
See, I sort of thought of it as a almost like a room within a room, or a prison within a prison.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Of like this sort of additional space that we see Mark kind of rely on, in a sense, throughout the episode, where he's constantly like trying to, like, I don't want to be here, and then he pops back into Harrow's office. I loved the subtle shout out to the sound design for this with the clock in the background, because it sounds like a pendulum going back and forth, and it mirrors Mark's experience of going back and forth between this meeting with Harrow and the other moments throughout the episodes, and of course time, right? And yeah, man, like, I think he's clearly been getting beaten up by Kennedy and Fitzgerald. I think, he bit one of them last time, and so I feel like that broken nose is payback for that. And obviously that's a thing in the comics, as you called out, Justin. And you even hear Harrow begging them not to hurt him, like as if they have more power than Harrow does in this situation. I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
Or that's just Harrow trying to still seem like he's on Mark's side, or whoever this is, their side.
True. Yeah.
His fake empathy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if this is yet another reality. That certainly comes. We certainly get a third sort of world or environment that we're exposed to later on in the episode. So yeah, I'm not sure it's crystal clear what exactly is going on, who exactly this is that we're seeing, and everything like that. But it's certainly, an attempt at making us question whether this truly is the reality and everything we've already seen is in his head. Even though I think most of us know what's kind of going on here.
I joined J-Law in the whole. I've read that part of. I haven't read all of Lemire's run there, but I read the first 5, which was all you really needed to sort of be like, oh my God, they pulled a lot from it. Except for you mentioned the 2 orderlies, Nate, and what's so funny is I was like, in the comics they're named Billy and Bobby, and it's like it's just kind of like such throwaway names, and then when you mention them here I'm like, wow, that was a step up, because the fact they just didn't go with Billy and Bobby, I'm like, okay, so they're taking this a little bit further. But it's crazy how much I can't tell if I'm really, really happy that I read them. I read them basically yesterday, or really, really, really sad that I'm like, oh, I've influenced my experience on the show and I haven't decided.
I totally feel that, Mike, because like I was kind of questioning the same thing. Like, I'm really enjoying the comic book, and I'm enjoying seeing certain aspects of that story find its way in this series. But at the same time, like, did I kind of spoil things for myself in that process? So it's still nice to at least point out little things like, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people are going to notice the Band-Aid, but like just
Yeah.
to see the Band-Aid, it was just
The
like
visuals
right away in my head.
later in this episode, you're just like, oh my god, they pulled so much.
Exactly.
And I stopped at 5, which is without spoiling too much, but almost like a parallel to this episode, which is like so crazy. Is those 5 are very related to these, and I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna wait until we watch the finale. And then I might go. Then I'll go back to reading because I was like, okay, I read those 5. I think I'm happy with that, and I just got a taste. I got a little bit, and I'm not going to read anymore because I want to go into the finale with like no more than what I've read.
Right.
I'm getting the same, maybe not exactly the same feeling because I don't think they're going to go too 1-to-1 with it, but with Miss Marvel, where I'm on the final volume of Miss Marvel, the 2016 run or one of
2014.
2014 run. Okay. And I'm just like it's getting to a place where I'm like now I'm starting to expect stuff for the series that probably won't happen, but we'll have to wait and see. I do think though. I do absolutely think it was Jake. I think the moment he starts talking, he's got the weapon in his hand. I think that's a different accent. It's Jake. His mouth moves differently, and you hear him almost in a way where I think it's Jake and then shifting back to Mark really quickly because he says, you're going to release the monster. He's going to destroy everything. He says he's going to destroy everything. And I don't think he's talking about Harrow at that point. I don't think he's talking about Amit because Amit's a woman.
Ooh, he's talking about himself?
I really think he's talking about himself here.
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Because especially if you take into context that this is possibly all in his mind, and even Dr. Harrow here is in his mind. Sure. Dr. Harrow saying, I'm not your enemy in this very moment. I don't know, man. It's getting me like a buzz to think that like that's really going to come true in our next
and
episode.
I'm sure we'll get to it as we move on here. But the fact that, as we learn later, Mark is the one who kind of knows more than the other entities within him. So him to say something like that, like I didn't put that together at the time, but definitely now. Yeah.
That is the moment though that you most obviously see the sort of difference in persona. Because even at that moment, that's like that's not Mark and that's not Steven.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like a New York accent almost.
But it feels completely, as you said, out of character. And that's actually a really good call out if it was very New Yorker, because instead of a London cabbie, you have a New Yorker cabbie.
Right.
And that's his personality, right? So maybe, I don't know. We're on to you, Marvel.
New York is mentioned later on in the episode as well when he's calling it.
He's got to have an accent. Like if there's a third one, it's not just going to be another American because that would be really confusing. So there's going to have to be some sort of accent.
Let's just hope it's a better New York accent than his British accent. But let's keep going here. We get back to the moment we left off last week with Mark, Steven, and Tauret screaming, and she asks if they're twins, and Steven says sorta. She then confirms for them both and us that Mark and Steven are indeed quite dead. She references some old scrolls and, like a Disney tour guide, welcomes them all to the Duat, which is the Egyptian underworld. Steven begins to explain to Mark that she's there to guide them to the afterlife. Mark asks if this is the afterlife, and Tauret mentions it's an afterlife, while name dropping, and this is what I want to chat about next here, guys. She name drops the ancestral plane. So here we get our biggest connection to the MCU, I think, so far in this show. What did you guys think of this connection to Black Panther?
I love that it gave those little that is the most obvious hint that they've ever had towards the MCU. So it's really cool because I wanted to see where this fits in. I didn't really put together, like I knew I'd heard it, but I didn't realize it was Black Panther. Literally, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, because that makes a lot more sense. That world has that sort of
spiritual,
place, so that very spiritual world. So yeah, I really like that, and it makes me wonder. And I don't know how all this is going to work, but it makes me wonder what the sort of the life cycle of these. What do they call them? They call them aspects in the comic, and it's whatever the word avatars. Sorry. I was going to say blue guys, and I was just going to make you guys even more confused. The avatars, so basically they're on this boat, they're being judged, and if they scales balance, they get to go back. So it's almost like they get a extra life if they do well in that life. I don't know what you guys think there, but that was kind of like the perception I got.
I was under the impression that going to the fields of the reeds is sort of like passing into heaven.
Okay.
You know, we'll get to the ending, but that's why the ending to me is just so precarious. I just don't understand. Like, they've really left things up in the air. And I don't know. Kev, you're the history guy. You might know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that's a very common ancient sort of belief, held by even the
Gladiator.
Romans and everybody like that. So certainly that would be, passing into the good afterlife, if you will.
Okay.
Well, just getting back to the ancestral plane, I think it's pretty dope. I was looking into it. It's ruled by Bast, who is the panther goddess, who apparently, according to the MCU, is one of the oldest members of the Ennead. So it would be pretty crazy if we see her in the MCU. We've seen the avatar for Osiris already in the series, so it isn't a stretch to say we won't see her, because apparently sometimes she's listed as like the offspring or even the sibling of Osiris. So it'd be really, really interesting to see if again they sort of form an even further connection, and especially with God the Gore Butcher coming up in Thor. Like, you have to imagine all these gods, Eternals, all this stuff kind of coming through, that they're going multiversal, they're going spiritual, and they're starting to move a little bit away from like the sci-fi space stuff that I think we were all kind of getting towards, until, of course, Fantastic Four, and then we'll probably go right back there. But
I think it's all playing together, though. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's all playing together, and I think that, the reference of planes overlapping and things intertwining, I think that's what we're going to start to see.
We've already seen that.
Yeah, we've already seen it, and I think we continue to see it.
Right?
We'll continue to see it, right? So it's really about understanding, you're telling the MCU is telling their stories in different facets, but at a certain point, they are just going to really intertwine.
From a narrative point going forward, what Nate brought in there when he's talking about Gore the God Butcher coming up, I mean, from a literary and writing perspective, no one will care about Gore the God Butcher if he hasn't butchered gods, and especially if he's butchered gods that you don't know anything about. So you have to introduce a lot more of this, because realistically, we only have a handful of quote unquote gods for him to butcher before someone has to stop him. So introducing all of these before he is there, ostensibly, it's going to have to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. This is 100% setting up that encounter, later this summer, and it's all about sort of setting up the astral dimension as the almost spiritual equivalent of the multiverse that we're experiencing. And so, once again, it's just this beautiful setup that Marvel's able to do, where they sort of prepare you and introduce you to these ideas in the simplest fashions, and then kick it up a notch without having to rely too much on explaining to viewers what's going on. And so, I think we are, again, getting that sort of spiritual multiverse here with all these gods, which, again, as you guys have mentioned, sets up perfectly for Gore.
Was it ancestral or astral? Was it astral that they said? They talk about the astral plane in Doctor Strange, and those are two totally different places. But I mean,
it's a parallel dimension where the soul exists outside of the body.
Okay.
Which is, but again, it's just, maybe that's just, we hear Toerrit say in this episode, like, there's so many of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
there is so many,
a ton of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
that makes sense. That makes sense. I like the idea, too, though, that, again, layering in all of these different spiritual layers and grounding it in culture, the fact that, it is grounded in Egyptian mythology, obviously serves as a background history to the existence of this spiritual astral plane, if you will. So,
and it's also kind of lovely that they, as creators, these writers have the ability to sort of, even at a spiritual level, I know we're talking about comic book characters here, but even at a spiritual level, give that to whoever's coming into this, right? They can open it up to the point where different people from all walks of life who believe completely different things can all sort of find themselves within the MCU, and I think that's really lovely how they're kind of setting up like how the afterlife works from a lore standpoint within the MCU. So let's keep on moving on here. To where it then says that the duat isn't easy for the human mind to process, so it appears in a form that best suits the one who is being carried to the afterlife. Stephen wonders why a psych ward, and Mark says that's because they're insane. According to him, the theory checks out because they're talking, right? They're talking to a hippo. Stephen and Mark aren't sharing a body, and the afterlife is apparently the reality, while the hospital is the imagination. Mark even ends up saying that Dr. Harrow is right and that this is just an organizing principle. While rambling on, Mark opens one of the main doors in the ward and sees that they're actually traveling on a massive boat on the dunes, where Taweret informs them that their hearts must balance on the scales of justice before they reach the field of reeds, or else they'll spend all of eternity in the duat, forever frozen in sand. And to do this, they must head back into the ward and reveal to each other whatever truths they haven't told each other yet, or the scales of justice won't balance. So guys, this sheds a little more light into how the afterlife and the journey to the afterlife kind of works. And I know we just kind of discussed it, but talking about these intersectional planes of untethered consciousness, do you think, which is a mouthful, do you think that they're confirming, some of the experiences we've seen, obviously, with characters like T'Challa, but I know a big one for a lot of fans who've always wondered, where did Thanos go? Right. And so, with seeing the place between worlds for each of these characters, is this kind of confirming that, this is how this works? This is,
100%.
Thanos.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I totally think so because again, all those instances, to think, we had Thanos. There was a scene where Tony Stark would have confronted his daughter that was older, right? That was inevitably cut from the movie. And I think, again, those little instances were just the smallest crumbs to insinuate the sort of spiritual quality that, again, is attached to the soul. It exists in the MCU, and obviously with characters like Doctor Strange and Black Panther kind of also hinting at those things, and now getting into Phase 4, where it really just seems to be going buck on this idea of the spiritual connection and the sort of layers of reality that exist in the MCU. Yeah, it goes without saying. I think that they're very much related.
I know that a lot of comparing to comics and the MCU and how they're pulling and going back and forth. And one of the things about the comics that kind of is just like accepted, I would say, is that no one ever really dies. You can die, but then they bring them back, and you can die and they can bring you back, and people kind of accept it. And there's not really an explanation for it for the most part. And half the time it's just enough to bring them back to tell a different story. But in the MCU and with movies, I feel like they realize that the audience can't fully accept it to the same extent, so they have to put something like this in place, or something like this at least is very important for bringing characters back. You have like bringing in the multiverse and bringing in a concept like this where you can go to these planes and realistically you can come back from these planes. So you can die and go to this plane, but somehow you can find a way out of it. You're never fully dead. There's afterlives and then afterlives and then afterlives. So you can always find a way, and they can always write a way to get people back. Means that these stories now on screen can be the same as comics, where they come back and they just keep telling new stories. And if they need to change out an actor, it's a multiverse. And if they need to bring back someone, Natasha Romanoff from the dead, like Natasha's not dead. Realistically, if you believe that all of this is going on, then Natasha's not gone. So everyone still exists somewhere.
See, I go back and forth on liking that aspect of the comics, because they can be so different at that point. You can bring in writers that are creating such different storylines, but they can still somehow be connected to a storyline where a character died. But at the same time, I do find that that could negatively impact a lot of the meaning for these deaths, right? I think obviously when we see these moments, it's I don't ever, again, when there was the rumors of and we'll find out pretty soon, of Tony Stark showing up in the Multiverse of Madness, that was upsetting to me, because I was like, no, he that was the moment, that he's gone. That's it. Cap is gone too. That, if you're gone, you're gone. But I do like the idea, kind of like a Force Ghost situation in Star Wars, and I don't write in. I knew you'd write in if you heard me talking about this. I do like that idea of still being able to see those characters or interact with those characters, but I never want them to be alive again in the movies. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I heard that Kevin Feige
until they are. Because
until they
because
until
people
Marvel
were pissed
feeds
that
it to me
Superman
in a way that I
died,
want it.
and they brought him back, And Superman's back,
Yeah.
and everyone enjoys his stories. It's like you hate it, and you have a bitter taste in your mouth until they're back, and you're enjoying a great, well-written, great character story. And it's just like, yeah, that sucked, and it was a bitter taste, but man, this story kicks ass.
I mean, I really do think they have to be careful with how often they go to the well on this sort of idea, and I think I wouldn't have a problem if we do see a different version of Tony Stark.
Yeah,
it's not our Tony Stark. He is gone, making the ultimate sacrifice. And so if they do bring back a different version from a different, multiverse, that's fine with me. But somebody like Black Widow, I mean, again, another sacrifice. She has to be gone. And so they really, it has to be part of the specific story they're telling for it to work, rather than something they can go to a year, 2, 5 years later and just bring back a character that was dead and completely gone. I mean, you really have to set up the rules and conditions for something like that beforehand and make it a very specific situation, not anybody at any time could always just come back. Because like you said, Nate, it does cheapen those deaths, and it does, if you aren't afraid that you might never see these characters again, then you won't care when they die, because so it is just it's a tightrope that they have to walk.
For sure. I'm not saying everybody, but it's a possibility. Like, we basically just watched a death of a character. They just didn't make it dramatic, and there was it was kind of just out of nowhere, and he died. And we're now watching it continue on, and we're pretty sure we're going to watch him come back from dead. And sure, this is a contained story, but if it wasn't this story and it was a different story, would it be cheap if it was just as good? I'm just playing devil's advocate, but I think that we're watching the story that you said you would feel cheap. But
I mean, but again, though, this is a character where almost from the very beginning, it's been set up that he was already brought back from death once because of his affiliation with Khonshu, and that's the story that's being told here. And so we already are able to expect that he might come back from this simply because of what we've been told and what we see later in this episode that really just sort of highlights what we've kind of heard rumblings of earlier in the season. We get that sort of more fulfilled as this episode goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, I'm about to pass into the field of reeds if we keep going. We got to keep going here. Love the conversation, though. So Mark and Steven go back and start analyzing each memory, which is represented by a room in the ward. Although a memory of Mark standing in the street gets Steven's attention, it's a cry of help that leads him to another room filled with the dead bodies of Mark's victims. Mark explains that they aren't good people and had to suffer Khonshu's punishment, which seems like a reasonable enough explanation until Steven spots a child who we learn was Mark's brother, Randall, who also goes by Roro. I don't know how Roro comes from Randall, but despite Mark's pleas to stop, Steven follows Randall through a door, and we see the tragic moments that lead to Mark's mother never forgiving him, which compelled him to run away from home. As Mark tries to stop Steven from going any further, they're transported to the memory of the Moon Knight's birth. We see all the dead bodies around a campsite, including Layla's dad, and Mark starts talking about how he went AWOL in a fugue state and was discharged from the military. So he started working for his old commander, Officer Bushman, who, with a change of heart, commanded Mark to kill everyone so there'd be no witnesses. But Mark instead attempted to help them all escape and failed and was shot himself. After dragging himself into a tomb where he's about to end it all, he's interrupted by Khonshu and offered the position of Moon Knight. Steven tells Mark that he's always being manipulated by Khonshu, but Mark says that the act of doing Khonshu's bidding was a better option than simply dying. So guys, which side are you on here? Are you on Steven's side here in believing that Khonshu truly has always been manipulating Mark, or do you still see Khonshu's action here as saving Mark Spector?
I mean, whether he's manipulating him or not, your options are death or do my bidding. So, I mean, it was up to he. It wasn't like he said, "I'll bring you back and you get to go and do whatever you want." He laid out the stipulations and Mark agreed. So, if he's going to have an issue with it, I don't think that's necessarily fair at all. I'm totally fine with Khonshu's arrangement. Take it or leave it, bud.
I think with Khonshu's, he is taking advantage of the fact that Mark was going to kill himself, and he reads into the fact that his mind is fractured. He sees that as a benefit to him. He sees that as something that he could exploit and use to his advantage in a way. But again, it's weird that he questions the idea of like, well, it was either dying or living. Was he just going to kill himself because he was already injured and he was going to die? Was that his mentality around why he was going to kill himself? Because, if you go up to a guy and say, well, don't kill yourself, I can give you superpowers and you can kill other people, right? And he's like, oh, okay, well, I guess, that's it, right? What was leading him to want to kill himself? Because that was a big revelation. The fact that, it wasn't that he was just shot and brought back to life. He was shot and willing to take his own life before Khonshu came and, played with his mind and then said, okay, I'll give in.
I was going to save this sort of the wrap up of my overall feelings, but this kind of feels like it fits in really well. Is just sort of, I found this scene to be a little disjointed because, Justin, as you said, he's willing to kill himself over what I thought was what he had done or what he couldn't save. That was like, he couldn't live with himself based on that, and he was quite well injured. So, hey, let's just wrap it all up. And then getting this offer from Khonshu, I was kind of like, all right, well, this guy's a vulture just preying on weak people. So I thought it was I didn't think it was that great of a deal. I'm like, this guy is definitely like taking full advantage of a guy who is at his absolute lowest point. There's nobody in a lower point than a guy who's got a gun to his own head. And he's fully taking advantage. And the thing that got me, though, is he did say, like, I want you to do my bidding. He didn't necessarily say kill more people, I don't think. Did he actually say kill more? He said to protect the riders of the night. And so realistically, making it sound like he's going to be a hero, I think. Because otherwise, if he did say, and I would like to rewatch it a second time now, because if he did say, you can do more of my bidding and kill the people I want you to kill, it's kind of like, well, that was what had you down at your lowest point. Why would you accept this deal that's telling you you're going to have to do more of it? And so that's kind of where I was like, I don't know.
Well, I wonder if for Mark, it's, we find out later on that his coping mechanism is to almost become a different person. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's how he's interpreting this, is that Khonshu's giving him a chance to have an outlet for those times of his life that he wants to forget, and it's just another place to sort of bury those feelings and those thoughts.
Oh, well, Khonshu is looking at this as free real estate, right? So he's like, yeah, he's moving in.
Did you guys
if you're
notice
leaving, I'll move in.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you notice when Stephen was walking towards the cliff, the dead bird that was had the head shaped like Khonshu?
Yeah.
And it just made me wonder if Khonshu always had an eye on Mark. And
like he's been watching him since he was like a kid.
Yeah.
And just waiting.
Exactly. But I just thought it was interesting because it's sort of like it becomes the symbol of death.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like Khonshu's image, because like, again, you see this dead bird, and the event that would, precede seeing that bird is the death of his brother. Mm-hmm. Here we have literally Mark at willing to take his own life right before death, and Khonshu is whisking in to save him. So it's just an interesting sort of visual play. I didn't know if anyone else noticed it. So
yeah, and what was that tomb even actually there? Like it doesn't look like it should have been there in that desert. Like it looks like it was very much like just like some cool club. But yeah, like maybe he saw it and it was not there before he was like, I'm at my lowest point, and Khonshu made it appear and was like, come over. Right. Because
it kind of looked like the sand was sort of, it was like brushed aside, right? It came out of the ground.
Yeah.
But okay, it's interesting stuff. Let's keep going here. Mark and Steven go back onto the ship and they start seeing souls dropping down into the Duat with Harrow. By Harrow without being passed through properly. Mark and Steven say that they need to go back into real life and stop Harrow's wrath. And Taweret obviously agrees with them and turns the boat. She says Osiris is not going to like this and warns Mark and Steven that if they don't balance the scales, they're not going to get out of the Duat anyways. So they better get to work on solving their issues. Steven plans to go through the door in Mark's memory to see what happened with him, but Mark stops him by saying that he's going to explain it, and that Steven doesn't need to see it. When Steven pushes through to let him go through that door, Mark suffers a breakdown and finds himself back at Harrow's office. Harrow calms Mark down and tells him to open up to Steven, and Mark looks at his reflection in the glass of water, that Harrow handed him, and then he's instantly transported back into his childhood bedroom. So, guys, just before we keep going here, really quickly, I wanted to call out, what do we think is actually happening in the world above them? Like, the MCU had to go through the everyday people. Like, I'm just thinking about us doing a podcast, and like 2 of us get dusted, and then we're doing a podcast again. We've already replaced those people, and then 2 of them get not that any of you can be replaced, but then they reappear back somehow sitting in their laps, right? And now, if one of us believes, like, I think it would be Kevin, honestly, would be the one. His soul would just get sucked because he knows the most about Egyptian history, and just get sucked into the duat. Do you think this is what's going on in the MCU above them? Is this actually happening? Is this a terrible, horrible event that we're going to actually have a little bit more of a bigger outcome from in our MCU proper?
I think you just kind of nailed it. I think there's an absolute terrible war happening, and I think who is it that Harrow's trying to release? I forget all the names. Amit. I think that Amit is released. They're on the warpath, and they are judging people for things they may do in the future, and they're culling them. I think it's like an absolute war with no opposition going on. And Moon Knight needs to show up and shut it down. That's my guess.
Nate, I just want to know why you picked me so easily there, and what is it that I'm going to do in the future that I deserve such a punishment? That's interesting. I'm certainly the most likely of the 4 of us. Don't worry. I'm not
to
offended.
believe in.
I just wonder what it is that I have in my future that's going to be so naughty.
Kevin, because from my perspective, I think that the idea is that it's only people who believe in the duat, in the Egyptian afterlife, that are actually getting sucked out of out of the world. It's not the people, right? Because even Harrow, I think he created this sort of cult around these beliefs. He found like-minded people to bring into his cult to then be judged by Amit. So I don't think it's just every single person in the world that's eligible to be eaten up by Amit. I think it's strictly just people who believe. I don't know. That's kind of what the
good save.
He was willing to judge. Well, I guess Mark knew, but he was trying to judge Stephen.
And Stephen, who very much is into and probably does believe to a certain degree Egyptian history, right? I think that's kind of how I read it, but it's just like, part of me wonders if this is really, if they are going to really bring this into because again, they focus so much on the snap in post-snap content of the MCU. I love it, don't get me wrong, but are they going to add another element
snap event?
Her soul got sucked by Amit the other day or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I feel like I'm not sure how to interpret the fact that these souls were falling from the sky. Obviously, great signifier with the purple magic showing these like shots just falling. When they get back on the other side and what Harrow's doing, I think it's still very selective probably, but maybe he has unlocked the full potential of Amit, right? Like, we're not at a snap level event yet, but we're kind of like on the cusp of that, and he's getting a little out of hand where it's like, okay, you're doing something, bud. Let's stop you. So
I think it's got to be like physical. Like, he's got to actually touch these people, and like I don't think it's
there has to still be.
I don't think he's visually looking at 1,000 people and just erasing them by thought. I think it's going to be like a physical thing, kind of like what Justin's saying there.
I think it would be nuts if he was one of them. If Amit comes through and is like, yeah, nah, dude, too bad. Thank you for releasing me. You're an awful person. Bye, and just eats them up. I don't know. But let's keep going here. Mark and Steven see a young Mark cowering in the corner of his bedroom while his mother bangs at the door. The young Mark starts muttering to himself that it's not his mother. It's not his mother, and he does so long enough to create Stephen, and we actually see. I think this moment is the birth of Stephen Grant, complete with a fake British accent. Stephen finally understands that his name is based off of a fictional character and that he's a figment of Mark's imagination. As Mark's mother barges into the room to beat young Mark, Mark pulls Stephen out of the room. Stephen is absolutely horrified by what he just saw, and he also is horrified at the understanding that he isn't real. But Mark assures Stephen that he is the part of Mark that got to live through a non-abusive childhood and have a good relationship with his mother, a reality that Mark always yearned for, but it never happened. Unable to digest that, Steven transports to Harrow's office. Obviously, and Kevin, you called this earlier, this is heavy stuff, even for the MCU. But this is confirmation that Steven has existed since Mark was a kid. You have to wonder why Mark's dad never attempted to get his wife the help she needed, right?
It's so crazy you asked that question. That's exactly what Kate says. What kind of father would let this happen to his kid? And it's funny because in past movies, history kind of thing, the roles are kind of reversed. Abusive father, mother who doesn't do anything. It's kind of like a very common story, I would say. I hate to say, but that's kind of like a very, very typical abusive family, I'd say. And so, not to get huge into my past, but I watched my mom go through something where she didn't want to leave the relationship she was in. Eventually did. She's all good. Everything's great. But when she was leaving, I was like a 16-year-old, and she kept asking me, like, I just don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And like, as a 16-year-old, I was like, even then, I'm like, yes, you are. You have to leave it. You need this. It's got to be done. But I've always remembered that moment as one of those things where, like, as an outsider, the perspective is totally different. And so this is kind of a deep talk for a Marvel comic book show, I guess, but it just was something that it reminded me of. And like, I can't imagine how many other broken homes could watch this scene and feel the same. And I was just like, the father in that moment sees both the good and the bad in the mom, and probably doesn't want to take that away. I just can't imagine. It's weird because the roles are reversed. People are like, how is the dad letting this happen? And that it's kind of my perception of it.
It's interesting because I enjoy that the roles were kind of shifted that way, and it does really center on the mother and the idea of that relationship. And thank you for sharing the story.
I'm good
because I think no, I know, but I think that it just goes back to really speak to the sort of real implications that Mark's backstory actually has, like grounded in trauma, which again is the constant theme of Phase 4. And I think there's a discussion there about how trauma in some way or another has impacted everything we've seen from WandaVision to now. Also, just the idea of seeing two sides of trauma, suicide, in the instance of how he then becomes Moon Knight, another personality, and here the birth of Stephen Grant out of trying to cope with that trauma. I think it just helps to solidify that this is the human part, essentially.
Those real life themes, they're going through so many Marvel stories right now.
It's really well done, and you got to like. It also just really brings into context the reason that obviously Mark chose to leave, right? Like I got it as like he was seeing his dad without communicating with his dad. He was seeing his dad choose his mom over him in that moment, right? And so that's kind of where that would absolutely hurt. And he also obviously is taking on all that blame throughout all those years, all those birthday parties, and living with that, and probably wholeheartedly believing a lot of it. And I just getting back to like some of the, again, production aspects of the show. Obviously the writing is phenomenal. I also love when they do just put in these little things in the background. If you notice, Mark's room has the scales of justice in the background, made out of wooden blocks, which was really cool. And then even more heartbreaking was the drawing of the one-finned goldfish framed on the wall. So you just have to imagine that he took that drawing that he was like making fun of his brother for and saved it. And
didn't see that.
Anyways,
well, it also just brings up the thing that he bought that fish that also had a one fin. Now, was that just coincidence, or did he manifest that fish from his mind? I don't know.
Right. Or did Steven bought the original Gus, and then maybe Mark switched it out for a one finned because of his brother?
Maybe it was always two finned. Like, he's had imaginary conversations with his mother, and sometimes he's in and out of consciousness, and all of a sudden it had two fins, and he's back to argue with the lady. And
that's true.
Forgot about the fish. I really appreciate that whole storyline and finding out that's where Stephen Grant came, because my initial perception was going to be like, oh, he's being saved by Khonshu, and this is where Steven and any other potential identities come from. And I was like, I didn't want that to be the case, but that's kind of what felt like it was going to happen. And then they showed this, and I was such a better story.
It's much more realistic.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
So let's keep going here. When Harrow mentions that Stephen brought himself to the institution after his mother passed away, Stephen gets agitated and tells Harrow that he's lying about his mother's death. So Harrow calls up somewhere, tells Stephen that it's his mother, and tells him to talk on the phone. And it's just really, it's honestly, this is where I started to I got a little teary-eyed. Stephen gets closer and closer and closer, and eventually just can't bring himself to touch the phone, and he admits that his mother is actually dead. And that's when Stephen sees Mark standing across the street, which is the first memory that he saw in the corridor in the psych ward. And we see him, Mark's drinking liquor, refusing to go to his mother's Shiva, while his father asks him to come in. Mark walks away and falls to his knees, lamenting that he can't let his mother win. That's when Stephen takes over, who is confused about where he is, and starts talking to what he thinks is his mother on the phone. Mark explains to Stephen that on that day his mother died. That's when Mark and Stephen's lives started clashing.
Boom. Yeah.
Stephen, realizing that his existence and Mark's trauma stemmed from his mother's abuse, which never let Mark forgive himself for accidentally killing his brother, consoles Mark. Stephen says that Mark was only a child and that he didn't know any better. And in doing so, we get to see literally the most it's the most literal self-healing that we've ever seen in the MCU. So guys, clearly we see Stephen clashing with Mark, and him losing control came from the reality of him unable to face his mother's death. I know for a lot of us, we still haven't seen this third alter yet. But seeing how these situations are seeming to stem from these moments of trauma, do you think we will, and do you think it'll come from the same trauma, or do you think it'll come from a different moment entirely?
Well, in this scene, there is a yellow taxi cab in the background.
Yeah.
And so is this the moment where that third personality, who we've all sort of been suspecting that it is born? Another instance of a coping mechanism, if you will.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I did notice that taxi cab, but to think that might be where that personality was born, that's really cool.
It's kind of giving you another hint. But yeah, I think that, Nate, you called it out. The after the entire series being so much about them fighting one another, here they're helping one another. Like, they're consoling one another. They're having an actual internal conversation, whereas they've always been at opposite ends. And I it felt so gratifying to get this moment, to have this moment. Great acting.
Yeah,
it
was. The acting, his going between the two characters here was maybe his best work in the series so far in that regard. And I just think it's amazing that, Stephen has always been Mark's sort of fail-safe whenever there's something that he's sort of having trouble dealing with. And this is a moment where maybe the Stephen personality didn't work to help him get through this really difficult time, and that's not only the reason why the third personality emerges at this point, but it's also why this is their moment of sort of coming together and understanding each other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. The beginning of this section that you were talking about, I loved that scene of him going to answer the phone. And at the very end there, and maybe it's just my ears because they're terrible, but there was a dial tone as they zoomed in on the phone. And
no one was there.
And no one was there, and I feel like nobody was there the whole time, so he didn't actually call anybody.
Exactly.
Is it just me, or is a dial tone always and forever haunting?
It sounds so much like the tone of, like, in a hospital bed.
Yep.
It's just always a haunting sound forever. Yeah. And I just, over the course of, I guess, a little bit from the very, very end of last episode, and over the course of this, you see Stephen and Mark, and especially in this last moment, come together, and they're a team. They're working together, and
emotionally,
officially,
too.
not just to get them out of a sticky situation. They're working together emotionally, and they're like
mind and heart.
Yeah, mind and heart. They care about each other. I just that it's definitely a special moment for sure. You're making me change my thoughts on this episode a little bit. With that. My score has been doing a little bit of this.
I wanted to just quickly, before we keep going, I wanted to just call out, I love the idea that this would also be the moment where his third altar would come through. But I wanted to also call out the moment where Mark tells Steven that he went AWOL in a fugue state. And I had to look it up. I'm like, what's a fugue state? And a fugue state is psychologically like it's when he's an altar, essentially, right?
I know, yeah.
And so here's the thing. Steven waking up in the middle of a military base would be something that Steven would have remembered and would probably have brought up at some point. I think something happened between Mark and Bushman that brought out that third altar. And I don't know if we're going to see it in this series, maybe unless it's like the very beginning of the last episode for like one scene or something, because they've kind of already really done the flashback thing with this episode was the flashback episode. But that's where I would peg Jake's creation. I think that's where Jake Lockley comes from. And I think Steven was created to live in bliss, where maybe Jake was created in chaos,
war.
To eliminate the danger surrounding Mark. So that's where I kind of was like, hold on a second, a fugue state. And I had to look it up, but I was like, there's no way that would have been Steven in that moment.
That's another great like call out moment that, again, just plants the little seeds of a third personality. And I'm totally with you. If this kind of feeds into the other idea that you had where this third alternate is more chaos and is able to kill and is just vicious, right? And if that personality was birthed in war, it makes me wonder which personality did Khonshu really want to cling to if he saw all those personalities, right? So who did he really want? Maybe he doesn't want Mark. Yeah, maybe he doesn't want Mark, right?
That's a great call out. I think what you said earlier there, Nate, about this being the flashback episode, I still have a feeling that we are going to see because all of the flashbacks in this episode are flashbacks to things and moments that like we had no idea about. They might have been mentioned or slightly hinted to or nodded to, but I think we're going to see the flashbacks in the very first episode to when he blanks out to when he wakes up. I think we're going to see the flashbacks of all of these other moments, or at least a few of them, where that third personality shows up, whether it's the last 10 minutes of this next episode, but I have a feeling they are going to fill in those blanks next episode.
Okay,
that's my guess. I know this is probably
I'm happy to be wrong.
The episode, but when you said like we already did flashbacks, but these are different flashbacks. These are filling in the blanks of stories they told us in this season, and I feel like that's still going to happen. But
I'm with you there. I feel that.
All right.
I hope. I'm hoping. Like I'm really hoping.
I hope so too. Let's get to kind of the last section here. Mark and Steven sense a disturbance in the Force and get back to the ship, where Telwerrit reveals that the scales are still unbalanced and that the dead are going to get them. So Telwerrit sort of like steps aside, and Mark and Steven actually, take out the dead. I love the moment where he's like he hits them with that bat. He's like he loves cricket or something. And then,
6.
Yes.
I've never played cricket, but he yells 6, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's a cricket thing. And then just when it seems like things are going to be all right, Steven gets dragged and falls into the duat and then gets frozen in sand. And that balances the scales. But, Mark then finds himself in the field of reeds, but he's all alone and by himself. And the episode ends right there. So, guys, before we get to your predictions for the finale, I wanted to ask a very important question that might play into your predictions, but overall, is Steven dead?
No. Well, we were talking about this before,
technically they're
right?
both dead. I'm curious if the moment that Steven is frozen is what triggers the scales to balance, or if it's actually they started to balance when they accepted and told their truths. Because I think it happened earlier, and I think Steven's come back. If they don't bring Steven, I'll be upset. Like it's you can't not have him come back. He has to come back, as far as I'm concerned. So
it would definitely take away from the Moon Knight character in general, even though I think a lot of fans weren't initially thrilled with Steven, especially like how he was the iteration of Mr. Knight, that they kind of wanted the more suave Mr. Knight after first like initial reviews. But I think as a fandom, or at least for me, I've fully come around. I love Steven. I really don't want him to be gone. I did want to call out just again, and I know we talked about this in the previous episode, but that little girl in the museum at the very beginning was literally talking about this scene. Like, did it suck for you not being able to pass through the field of reeds? And it makes me feel like whoever, like, what if, like, I don't think she's coming back, but she could have been like an avatar in that moment for the god of time. Like, I don't know who the Egyptian god of time is, or if there is an Egyptian god of time, but it just seems like it's just so cool how they were able to sort of add all these things in from the very beginning. But yeah, I don't want Steven to be dead.
I feel like this was written first, this episode. Or at least maybe the last 2 episodes, and then they just wrote everything else to kind of seed plant it and went backwards. We had the same theory around WandaVision too, right? To think about like how the penultimate episode of that did serve to answer a lot of questions, but then it was about planting those questions throughout the rest of the episodes leading up to that 8th episode, right? So yeah, I think that everything was done with intention. And I think they enjoy doing that, and this felt very reminiscent of a WandaVision-esque penultimate.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into all that maybe with our overall thoughts, but this brings us to our prediction segment for what we think will be revealed in the future of this series. In this case, the finale. So I want to know what the Pharaoh is going on, Mike. What do you think the finale is going to be?
I mean, I already alluded to some of the stuff that I think we're going to see. I think we are going to see a third identity show up. I think we're going to see sort of where that identity has been throughout all of the scenes and episodes that we've seen so far, because I think that reveal, even if it's a montage of sorts, I think that's kind of where it's going to happen. It's weird because this episode somehow gives me the vibes of the finale of Loki, where I'll save some of those thoughts for, I guess, the overall thoughts of this episode. But I feel like this felt almost more of a finale, except for the cliffhanger at the end, because it gave us a lot of answers. When the bad guy, quote unquote, is still alive, so it's not wrapped up, but it definitely had that sort of like, here's all your answers type part. I think we're gonna get Moon Knight back. Steven and Mark are gonna be full, like, having the conversations with themselves as Moon Knight and kicking ass to stop Amit and Haro in what I'm assuming is a massive battle happening
on the pyramids.
Yeah, on the pyramids. on Earth, or wherever that may be. So that's what I think we're going to see them get back to that. And maybe that third personality shows up. This is my guess, and a wicked scene that I could see is, if I was writing this, Steven and Mark down on their luck, down on their knees. They're like, we're done. We can't make it out of this alive.
Yeah.
Third personality shows up and just rages. That's my idea. Yeah.
Okay. So he's the hero then. Okay.
He does become the hero. That carnage is worth something to them somehow.
Okay. Justin. What the Pharaoh, dude?
Yeah, I've been alluding to some of it as well. I do think that Mark and Steven will find their way back. And I think that we'll see a final confrontation between Harrow and Moon Knight. I do think that you're onto something there, Mike, with the flashbacks. The scene that I was referencing is, there's a scene in the trailer that they've used numerous times of Mark, what seemingly looks like Mark, falling. And it was in that Swiss mountain scene. And I'm wondering if that's how he fell and landed on the ground and broke his jaw. Because remember in episode 1 when we find him, he's waking up. So I think you're right. I think we're going to see some flashbacks that are going to fill in the blanks of what might have happened in and around those moments when this third personality took over. That being said, I don't really know what else I could predict with it, because the way they leave things, Steven's gone, Mark's has,
It could be
has made it
anything.
to the fields. It could really be anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm interested though. I'm very, very interested because unlike WandaVision, where at the end of that penultimate it was like, okay, we know what's next. It's the battle, right? Here it's not as clear, and I think that's kind of refreshing.
What's happening on Earth is unknown, right? I don't know why I'm pointing above my head and somehow
because you're in hell. You're in hell, bro. You're in the
yeah.
Egyptian hell. Yeah.
Kevin, how about yourself? What the Pharaoh do you think is going to happen in this finale?
I think the two gentlemen before me really did call out a lot of the things I'm expecting to sort of and want to see in the next episode. I think it'll be Layla who somehow gets Khonshu and frees Khonshu somehow, and he's the one who sort of brings them back. And I think it would be a great scene if he comes back to life after being shot there, left for dead, and she goes, "Steven, you're back." And it's not Steven. Oh, okay, Mark. And it's not Mark. And that's the moment we finally get introduced
I like
to
it. I got
Jake.
chills. I got chills.
And then we go into almost that flashback, and that's explaining how he's played a role in all of those missing moments that we
Boom,
saw
you just
already.
wrote that episode. We gave you all the pieces. You just wrote it. Thank you.
That was a 3-man effort there, guys. We did it together. But I could almost see that's how that episode. Now I don't know how we get Steven back after where we left him, frozen for all eternity. But they'll figure something out. But no, that's kind of how I see it all coming back. And then it really is up in the air in terms of what the big battle is going to be, and do they take down Harrow, or is there is it left for a possible season 2? Because I don't feel like this story is anywhere near, at least the Moon Knight story is anywhere near being told. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get a Moon Knight season 2, but I definitely think we're going to get a Moon Knight will return in, and I think we're going to get a very specific notification to say this is where Moon Knight's coming back, and I don't think it's going to be that far away. I want to take a moment just before we keep going here, and for my prediction, absolutely, Mark and Steven and Jake are absolutely going to work together in the finale, because they told us so through a QR code in this episode. Every single episode, if you haven't noticed already, features a QR code. If you scan the QR code, this one, by the way, was right when before he opens the doors, he's saying Crowley, which is fitting because it takes you back to a comic book issue when you scan the QR code. And so he says Crowley's going to call Bingo, oh my God. And then again, right before then, you scan the QR code. And this takes you to a premium issue with the tagline, "They become one to do what they must." So, I mean, if that's not proof enough,
foreshadow,
that we're going to be getting this in the finale, I definitely think that's going to be it. But again, with Harrow calling out earlier saying that he isn't the bad guy in this episode, I kind of believe him. I kind of believe that he isn't actually, he's, especially this Ned Flanders ass looking version. I don't think he is.
He's not very badass. That's for
he's
sure.
not very. No. I'm gonna hold on to the idea that Jake, I think, won't be the hero. I think he will be the bad guy, the overall bad guy for this show, and I don't think it's gonna have a happy ending. And to throw a Hail Mary, I'm gonna throw a Hail Mary prediction out here. Spoilers for Spider-Man: No Way Home, but we got Daredevil confirmed in the MCU the same week as the finale of Hawkeye with Kingpin. I think this, obviously they're planning this stuff so well. We're going to have something to do with the multiverse in the finale or in the post credits or in the what have you, in the very last moments. Something is going to happen, and I think if I'm going to make my final prediction, it's going to be something between the Ennead and the Illuminati.
Yeah, I can see that.
Interesting.
That's my thought.
I'm
That's
with
my
you on
theory.
that. I really agree that Moon Knight, I think this is a limited series, and I think that Moon Knight will be back in some sort of team up of sorts.
Yeah,
I think I don't disagree with that. I think before we get a season 2, we'll probably get the team up. But I don't think that the character is done in the exploration through the series. There's so many threads here. Whatever's left is there's going to be a lot there. So I think there's more to explore. It's just it might be some time before we get a Moon Knight season 2, and we
like
might
a
see
phase
him
5, get another
exactly.
series. Like you see him go
Yeah,
through.
we
a
might
ton
see him
and
show up
then-
in other things. Yes.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, maybe a Scarlet you were saying like I think a couple weeks ago or last week, like you would want a Scarlet Scarab series with Layla, right?
Yep.
So maybe that's where we go and see Moon Knight next.
How crapped would your pants be if it was like Moon Knight will return in Multiverse of Madness? Like,
Dude,
like
that's what I'm saying.
you know,
That's
because
what
what
I'm
it
saying,
is,
man.
we've got
Okay,
it
is
next
that what
week.
you were alluding to? Because that's my next question. That was what I wanted to ask, because you seemed like you had an idea of where we would see, Moon Knight will appear next, and you didn't say where.
I think it's
like,
Blade. I think it's Blade.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would say Blade would be where I would predict it, but Multiverse of Madness might be too close. But it is interesting that the same week that the season finale is happening, we are getting
happening.
Doctor Strange.
Something's
so
happening.
there could be something. I don't disagree with that, but I don't think it's going to be rooted in Moon Knight's connection. It might be rooted in something that has been established in this world, if you will, right?
What's the timeline there? Next week is not the same week that it comes out, right? We've got next week is the finale, and then the week after is Multiverse of Madness.
Wednesday's the finale, Friday's the multiverse. It's 2 days apart.
So it's literally the next day that it drops in theaters.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't have tickets yet.
Well, listen, let's get to our overall thoughts and final score for this penultimate episode. I think for this one, you're going to want to write this down if you haven't already. We're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 intersectional planes of untethered consciousness. All right? 1 to 5 Kevin's just rolling his eyes
I'm writing
so far
that down.
back.
Can you say it one more time for me, please?
1 to 5 intersectional planes of untethered consciousness. Mike, as our guest, how about you go first?
Oh, man. So much pressure. Overall, I am loving it. Just Moon Knight in general. I'm loving that they, they're borrowing from the oldest and greatest stories of this world. And the MCU in general has been doing that as of late. And so I love that. I think that this is like such a great way to go, to have different walks of life connect and force dummies like myself to go and look up information about things and old myths and stories of gods and history and things that I wouldn't have cared about at all in my 20s. So overall, that's doing an incredible job of that. My feelings on this episode are probably about as conflicted as the timeline of when things were happening in this storyline. Like I loved it. We got so many answers. As I said, they served them up. They served up so many answers in this. They just put them all on a platter and were like, boom, here you go. And they did it with one of my least favorite writing perspectives. Like, the character's crazy. He's popping in and out of doors and weird things are happening, and we're getting all the exposition that we would possibly need to get everything on this character that we were missing. So part of me was like, oh man, they're making it really easy on themselves. But I do have to give it to them that it's done in the best possible way that I've probably ever seen or ever will see. So I'm giving them that. And for that reason, and just to call back, because I won't be here on the finale, I know that Darcy's got a real hot seat to be on that. So I did want to call out one thing that I'm really excited about is that first line. I believe it's from the first episode, when they say there's chaos in you. I think that is 100% referring to that other identity, and that will definitely come back. So I just really wanted to kind of point that out. I'm sure you guys have all heard that, but I'm just like, man, that's it's such great writing, such great character development, and I didn't get the big wow and like sort of smack to the face as I did last episode, and for that reason, and just because it was a little all over and a little bit hard to follow, this outline and having this discussion has obviously helped me with that. So I've given it another 0.5% in that. I am going to have to give it 4.5 out of 5 intersectional planes of untethered consciousness.
Nailed it.
So still a great episode. I loved it. It was probably more of a 4. But I think that having this discussion and just what I'm hoping to see, I kept putting it out there in the universe last time to get a really great episode, and I feel like I got it this time. So I'm putting it out there for potential 4.5.
There you go. Okay, Justin.
Yeah, I think this episode was very much what I had anticipated for the penultimate of this series. It was meant to fill in the gaps, featuring some revelation, some that were seed planted throughout the series thus far. Others were fairly big, and this was all on the shoulders of Oscar Isaac's performance, carrying the emotional weight throughout the entire episode. The use of the psych ward, which was a key place, as we were mentioning in the Jeff Lemire and Greg Small 2016 run, is leveraged here as a place of sort of a self journey, while also taking place within the confines of his mind. There's so many different concepts that are being played here: reality, dreams, and just the power of the mind. And the hospital setting provides a sort of bizarre backdrop and throughout this whole process, as sort of serving as a metaphorical prison of his mind. Both of these characters are set on a path of self-discovery to help balance the weight of their hearts, which is achieved through relying on their own memories and learning from their memories. We seemingly get Stephen's origin story, as you pointed out, while we also get Mark's origin story of how he became Moon Knight. I think that these two juxtaposed next to each other, rooted in real human emotions, helps elevate this character to be, again, human, beyond just having this sort of spiritual connection. This is like even more amplified in the moment that we discussed in the streets, where Stephen is consoling Mark and trying to help reconcile the loss of his brother and the carrying the weight, and the loss of his mother subsequently, and the relationship that they had. This episode is a huge sidestep from the main story, but it is much needed. Very similar to the penultimate episode of WandaVision. And honestly, it was purposeful because it just gives so much more background to obviously Mark and Steven, but also just grounds their personalities in trauma. And after talking with you guys, I had this at a 4.5, but I'm going to be giving it a 5 out of 5. Intersectional planes of untethered consciousness. I know Nate likes to do acronyms anytime. Like, he'll be like, yo, so you're going to go see Mom? I'm like, Mom? Multiverse of Madness?
Listen, it's a thing that I've done for most of my life, is just acronymize things. Is that a word? Acronymize? Yeah. Kevin, how about you go? Hoy.
Oh God!
No, God, no.
I am just gonna go. I think this episode was really important. While it steps away from a lot of sort more of the action that we've been accustomed to in a series like this, there's almost none to speak of, really. It really is more of an emotional journey with the character, and as cool as the show has been, as fun as the storytelling aspects and the sort of what's going on aspects of the story have been, and as fun and likable as Mark and Steven have been, this episode finally gives you something to sort of attach yourself emotionally with the character, and I think that was really important to do. And while I think there are still gaps that I love, I'm shouting back again to Mike's call out for next week, where we're going to get those flashbacks of the holes that we were missing from what we've physically seen as an audience in those first few episodes specifically. This finally getting that origin story without just doing a direct flashback. It was such a fun and unique way of telling that story. And while, again, it was very exposition heavy, it didn't feel like it was as heavy in exposition because of the way they were telling that story. And I think that's what makes the writing so successful for this episode. And so, and I think they've gotten so many of the really important questions out of the way that next week it is just sort of wide open to really focus on more of that action and wrapping up this story while filling in some littler gaps for the third persona, which I think we all are expecting to see next week.
Come on, third persona. Let's see it.
I really thought we'd see it this time. I did.
So did I. I mean,
I really did.
As soon as you didn't see the sarcophagus, the third sarcophagus or the second sarcophagus in the previously on, I was like, I don't know if we're getting it here.
Yep, that's a good call.
But so I think there's no way they can't do it here. So we're definitely we'll know right away from the previously on, and we'll see some of those scenes that they're going to use the flashbacks to fill in. So
holding the
I'm
gun,
very excited
holding
for
the
that. And so while this episode didn't pack that, like, oh my God, I need to see that next episode right now sort of moment that episode 4 did, it did so much as a penultimate episode to get me excited for the finale. It was just as good as the previous week, and I think almost as good as the previous week. I can't go out and give it another perfect 5, but I'm damn close. I'm going to toss this one a 4.8 out of 5. Intersectional planes of untethered consciousness.
That's a solid 5.
It's a 4.8. It's a solid 96%. It was really damn good.
Kevin, we're going to have to go over one day what a 4.8, 4.9, 5.
It's math. It's math. Just do the math.
It's a 96%. It's so close to 100.
That's why I would also do like 3 decibels where I'd be like 3.759.
Shut up. We're not going that far.
I mean, that's a 71.8, just in case you wanted to know. Oh, my God.
It was just there.
You guys already said pretty much everything I was going to say.
Wrap this up then. No, I'm just
that's it. Okay, cool, great. Let's for the episode. This did follow the formula of the last episode of WandaVision. There absolutely is a theme of dealing with one's trauma in these MCU shows, and I'm so down for it. I think again, the whole point of these comics, and Stan Lee has talked about this in interviews, it's to
relatability,
create that relatability. We're looking at humans at the end of the day.
Yes.
Even though we're talking about gods, we're talking about all these things.
Human emotions.
We're looking at these human emotions, and it's such a great way to explore them. And originally in comic books, that was a way to be able to help younger audiences do that. And now as we've kind of grown up and grown into this content that is more for all ages and a little bit more for adults, especially I think recently, I think it's just perfect that this is the direction the MCU is going. Oscar Isaac is absolutely phenomenal. I hope we do see an Emmy nomination for his work in this show. I would love to see him take something like that, and for the MCU in general. I like that they covered the episode covered a lot of ground. They managed to fully go over Mark's origin story while taking some creative liberties from the comics for the better. And this is such a creative, as Kevin, you were pointing it out, like it's such a creative use of exposition that you don't end up caring about the fact that it is exposition. Like it's just so lovely and just, again, you get to see the deepest, darkest moments that are explained by having them show you instead of tell you.
Yeah, man.
And that was really nice. And I will say though, the only thing that kind of brought me down a little bit was I just feel like there's so much that I feel like they still need to go through that they won't be able to do within the next hour.
It's not lost,
and I'm not ready to, by the end of this episode, I wasn't like, okay, cool. By the end of give me one more hour of this and I'm done. Like I'll be happy with where these characters end up. I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off. I want more. Can we just put that on a t-shirt?
See, I feel opposite.
I want more. Yeah.
I feel opposite. I do feel like we've got a full story out of this. It's a complete story, and I will leave this feeling
it's an origin story.
Quite happy with just a pretty regular battle at the end. Like I don't think that there is too much more to wrap up. It's not like Lost where it's like that wraps up and you're like, whoa, wait a second, I have a lot of questions. Like there is other things they could explore. But if they don't, I'm not going to be upset about it.
Okay. All right.
Personally.
All right. Well, I do think that I just feel like there could have been a little bit more, in my opinion, balance between like the origin story that we got and just a little bit of pushing the needle forward to prepare us for the finale that we didn't get. So I'm gonna dip a little lower than last week, probably my lowest score ever, and give it a 4.5 out of 5. Intersectional planes of untethered consciousness. I can't. It's Marvel, guys. Okay, if any of the people write in or are listening to this that say we give Marvel and Star Wars too high of scores, suck it. I don't care. I love this stuff. It's too good. Yeah. Okay, well, as an Egyptian Cher might say, can't you believe we are almost done with this series? So before we end off here, Mike, do you want to do the plug, talk about your podcast, tell people where they can listen to more of you?
Well, I do have a podcast called Dumpster Talk. We're bringing it back. It's like a monthly thing. It's not like a weekly, super weekly. We'd love to do it. Maybe if I can get more co-hosts to join me and someday maybe. But right now it's me and my buddy. It's dumpstertalk.com. You can find us on all the podcast streamers, and I'm hoping to reach out and find other people like this where I can join them and they can join me, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I'm involved in. Yeah. And I appreciate you guys having me. This has been a blast. It's getting to join the people that I listen to, and I don't have to sit in my car and go, oh, I got to text Nate. I better pull over.
Pull it over on the highway.
Or I call
Yo, that
him.
was
I'm
a
like, dude, what are you
spoiler,
doing?
bro.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I need to talk to you about this. You're like, I'm at work, man. I'm like, I'm listening to episode whatever. Yeah.
But Mike, we're so thankful for you to come on and stoked to have you on with the knowledge that you do have. Again, you said you're kind of in between with the comics a little bit, but just a wonderful guy to talk to. And honestly, if any of our listeners are listening, definitely check out the Dumpster podcast. We'll have we're gonna have the link in our description for this episode, because honestly, like, these guys freaking rock. And like I said last week, it's like sitting down with some buddies over a beer. Like, it's just a good time just to sit back. Honestly, I kind of am stoked for summer, because I kind of want to just put some AirPods on, start a fire in my backyard, and just sit back and listen to you guys and feel like I'm even closer to you. So it's a really, really good time.
We put up an episode. There's one backup now, so we're back officially.
I just hope, Nate, that our listeners are listening. That was very interesting.
Call that
if
out
our
too.
listeners are listening,
Yeah.
I hope so.
If they're not, you're in trouble.
If our listeners are watching, no, I'm just joking.
Maybe one day they'll be watching.
One day.
Yeah.
One day.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
Hey, we'll have you
Hanging
back
out.
again for sure.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Cool.
you'll be
Always.
back. You'll be back. All right, that's it for this week's episode of Watch Club. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you haven't already, well, make sure to, you can write into the show with your thoughts or predictions on the shows we cover in Watch Club. I'm going to hand the control. Justin, I think we've gotten really good at this by this point, so I'm just going to hand it right to you. My personal deity, Justin the Egyptian Jackal, he's going to let you know how we can reach, you can reach, and all of us.
Okay. They can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or on Twitter at GeekcentricYT, or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric. Did you fuck that up? Sounds like you fucked that up.
I think I was just going in and out of consciousness. I think was what was happening. Did you see? I was like, it made this sound
I
effect.
slowed down, flipped it, and reversed it.
Yes, exactly. Keep in mind, we also have a ton of other episodes covering the latest and greatest shows and movies out now, including our recent spoiler-free reviews for Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Northman, along with our spoiler-free review of Ozark Season 4 Part 2. And coming soon, we'll have our spoiler-filled review for the finale of Ozark Season 4 Part 2, along with a ton of multiversal coverage all over Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Plus, we have our weekly This Week in Geek episodes where we break down the latest trailers and news every single Wednesday. With this past week, this past week's episode where Justin and I, we went off on our thoughts on Netflix's decision to slash animation projects. We really went, Justin, we went off, dude.
Yeah,
we went off.
It was,
I knew it was coming. It was epic.
that's why Kevin wasn't there. Okay.
Flipping tables, just trashing the place.
It would have been dangerous. We would have seen his Jake Lockley. And then we also discussed the latest trailer for Pixar's Lightyear, which, man, dude, are you stoked for? Are you excited?
I mean, I know that we've gone quite over time, because I just want you guys to know that I got a lot of Buzz, quote unquote, homework from Nate, because I got a BuzzFeed quiz and I had to watch the trailer for Buzz Lightyear, because he was saying we might talk about it, which you feel free to cut this. But I was rather impressed. I've enjoyed Toy Story, never been my favorites. I didn't know how I was going to feel about Chris Evans as Buzz Lightyear, and after watching the trailer, I'm like, this works. It's totally cool. I didn't think that the story was going to go as crazy as what it was. Watching that trailer, I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm super, and that's Taika Waititi, I think, Rock voicing a
Yeah,
character.
Let's
I'm
go.
always in with anything he has ever even come close to touching, even breathed on. I'm in. So I feel like he's done just about everything that I'm watching or paying attention to these days, though. So it's a win for me. But that looks like it's going to be a really great story. So I'm all in to check that out for sure.
There we go. All right. Well, Mike, Justin, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me for this Watch Club. And as we say,
Later, skaters.